I'm going to share a devotional from what is one of my favorite passages in the whole Bible, and I try to use it as a daily guide for how to live my life, and I hope that you will too. So hear now the word of the Lord from Philippians chapter 1, verses 20 through 26. I eagerly expect and hope that I will in no way be ashamed, but will have sufficient courage so that now, as always, Christ will be exalted in my body, whether by life or by death. For to me, to live is Christ, and to die is gain. If I am to go on living in the body, this will mean fruitful labor for me. Yet what shall I choose? I do not know. I am torn between the two. I desire to depart and be with Christ, which is better by far. But it is more necessary for you that I remain in the body. Convinced of this, I know that I will remain, and I will continue with all of you for your progress and joy in the faith, so that through my being with you again, your boasting in Christ Jesus will abound on account of me. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. The kind of faith described in Philippians 1:21, where you can say to live is Christ, but to die is gain, is the kind of faith that I strive for. It is faith that trusts so fully in Christ and in his resurrection that you are unafraid of death, while also turning that faith into action, where every step you take is reminiscent of the Lord himself. But I have to admit that it's difficult to achieve that kind of faith. And some days it's harder for me to say to live is Christ, and some days it's harder for me to say for me to die is gain. But I think that this passage provides 3 ways to live out that kind of faith so that we can say, for to me, to live is Christ, and to die is gain, with Paul. The first way is found in verse 20, and it is to exalt Christ in everything we do. Paul was able to confidently say that Christ would even be exalted in his death because of the courage that came from Christ. We also can and should exalt Christ in even the painful or uncomfortable things, like this quarantine. We can daily choose to say, Lord, I praise you. We also exalt Christ in how we choose to do those things, whether we work as though we were working for the Lord and not for human masters, or whether we complain. This is not to say that we have to pretend to be happy all the time or that everything is going great, but rather that we can choose a holy, loving, and courageous attitude when we deal with painful things, so as to exalt Christ in everything. Paul did this while he was in prison writing this letter. He never tried to claim that prison was great, but in his circumstances he still exalted Christ. The second way to live out this kind of faith is found in verse 22, and it is to strive for fruitful labor. Paul had faith that if he continued living, God would use him to bring about fruitful labor. There was no maybe about it. Yet there will be times when we don't feel like we're seeing fruitful labor. Maybe that means the people you're praying for aren't getting better, the situation isn't changing, the church isn't growing, or your work isn't going well. We must continue to have faith in God and do the work he has called us to do. We must continue to strive for fruitful labor and not be discouraged. Finally, the third way to live out our faith is in verses 25 through 26, when Paul declares that the Philippians' boasting in Christ Jesus will abound because of Paul choosing to continue to live. And other people's boasting in Christ should abound because of us as well. And I feel like boasting is often seen as like a bad thing that you shouldn't do in the church, but I'm grateful to say that we do have a God that we can boast in. And other Christians should make us more proud of the God that we serve, because we should see the Spirit of Christ in them. And this is good news for us because it means that we don't have to do it alone. We can see our fellow believers living out the faith of, for me, to live is Christ and to die is gain. And we can use that as an encouragement and continue in our own progress and joy. So my daily practice for you is kind of 3 daily practices. I encourage you to find a time today to exalt Christ. Now, we should always be exalting Christ in how we live our lives, but I encourage you to take a moment today to say, Lord, I praise you because, fill in the blank. Or maybe even, Lord, I praise you even though, fill in the blank. Then take the time to continue to pray for fruitful labor. Pray for that thing that never seems to change or get better. Finally, thank God for the people in your life that make your boasting in Christ abound, the people that are an example of faith to you. And maybe you even want to send them a text or a call today as well to encourage them. I think that would be great. Now I pray that all of you may be able to say, "For to me to live is Christ, and to die is gain." Amen.